So moving on, the introduction of bioprocessing, in a nutshell, bioprocessing is the use of living cell to produce desired product. The desired product could be a drug, could be a nutraceutical, or any other product which is developed by bioprocessing. However, 85% of major end applications for bioprocessing is for pharma industries. So basically, growing of living cells and engineering them to provide or produce desirable drug or biologicals is the bioprocessing workflow. And this workflow is mainly segmented into two phases, one upstream and second downstream. Upstream phase is making the product, whereas downstream is purifying the product. So in the upstream starts with cell line development, where a desired cell line or cells are being grown from the flasks or plates, and with the help of media, those cells are grown to the needed density, which are then grown in a large scale in a bioreactor or fermenter under the optimum conditions such as pH or temperature. Once the cells are grown and once the desired product is produced in a fermenter, those cells are harvested and the desired product or the drug or biologic here is filtrated from the harvested product, removing the cells or debris. It is being filtered using various downstream steps such as filtration, chromatography, ultrafiltration, and finally the product, the drug or biologic is lyophilized or made stable and then packed in by fill and finish formulation steps. So these are all the major steps in bioprocessing workflow, and how the bioprocessing workflow is segmented into upstream and downstream operations. To understand the market for bioprocessing, as I mentioned, the market involves various consumables, reagents, or equipment and technologies that are being used across each step of the bioprocessing workflow. So 40% upstream constitutes 40% of the bioprocessing market, and downstream constitute 60% of the market. The upstream is capital intensive as bioreactors, fermenters are critical in the upstream operations. Of course, because uh, these are not procured each year or annually, though it is capital intensive, it constitutes 40% of the market. Whereas downstream processing, it includes
हेलो
all.
मैं फोन करें तो तैयारी करना चालू कर
So downstream processing includes all reagents, consumables, and which are used in every batch of bioprocessing. So as these are recurring consumables being used frequently, regularly within each batch or within each step of bioprocessing workflow, this downstream processing market is comparatively more than the upstream, constituting around 60% of the market. Try to understand each step of bioprocessing workflow, how much each step or how much each consumables, equipment or technology used within each step constitutes to the overall bioprocessing market. Within upstream, fermentation constitutes a major share of 40% of the market because of the capital intensive fermenters or bioreactors that are used, and this is the critical step for scaling up the needed culture or the cells. Media preparation, cell culture media reagents constitutes more than 25%, and harvesting step constitutes around 20% of the market. Whereas in downstream, chromatography resins that are used for purification filtration constitutes major chunk of the downstream market, followed by ultrafiltration, filtration, and finally lyophilization, which helps in stability and packaging, and fill and finish formulation steps account for around 10% each. So this helps the split of the market by each phase of bioprocessing helps the companies or investors to understand where they should uh, focus their products, or where they should position their products across the bioprocessing workflow. So to understand the overall market for bioprocessing, the market is uh, around 62 billion in 2024, which has grown with around CAGR of 14 to 15% from 36 billion in 2020. In 20 2024, the upstream market is around 26 billion and downstream market is around 36 billion. So I'll explain the drivers for the growth of the market in the later slides. But here, I just wanted to summarize the impact of COVID on bioprocessing industry. So during COVID period or in the historic last 5 years, there is because of the disruption in the supply chains, many companies wanted to strengthen their supply chains. And in the forecast period, all companies are focusing on stockpiling or centralized regulatory information across the bioprocessing workflow because of the need to produce biological and single use is preferred, and there is high demand for single use going forward. Also, there is an increase in use of automation technologies with minimal manpower interruption. And so the trend of increased automation for efficiency and reduced dependency uh, is is going forward in the next forecast period. So the impact of the COVID-19 is the increasing use of single-use systems, investment on infectious diseases related drugs or biologicals, and increase in use of automation, which are continuously in high demand for the next 5 to 10 years. If we see the market for next 5 years in the forecast period, the market is estimated to grow from around 70 billion in 2025 to around 140 billion, almost double by 2030, which is again a growth rate of around 15%. North America continues to be, or North America has a dominant share in the bioprocessing market because of the well-established biopharma infrastructure. Major biopharma companies are located in North America, and the region is also a hub for high-end CDMOs. APAC, of course, is the emerging region with with fastest and growing number of CDMOs and biopharma companies in APAC. The region is expected to have a high growth rates for bioprocessing market in the next 5 to 10 years. Let's try to understand the market split by the type of equipment, consumables, or services within bioprocessing market. The equipment, though capital intensive, is a one-time purchase and it constitutes to around 25% of the market. Major equipment include bioreactor, chromatography, resins, and other centrifuges and other such equipment. Consumables, though, have a lower price compared to equipment. They are of recurrent use and used frequently almost in every batch, and hence the consumables constitute around 60% of the market. Services constitute around 15% of the market, though high value per project, but less outsourcing or less than the equipment or consumables, and hence it constitutes around 15% of the market. So if you try to understand the market in terms of the end product, which are produced using bioprocessing workflow, monoclonal antibodies constitute 40%, followed by vaccines because of large scale manufacturing. Cell and gene therapy continues to grow and occupies significant share of around 18 to 20%, whereas others, including other recombinant proteins, other fusion proteins, constitute less than 20% of the market. So all blockbuster biologic drugs, or many of the monoclonal blockbuster biologic drugs, are monoclonal antibodies such as Humira and others, and increasing use after COVID. There is an increasing research on mRNA and other viral vector type of vaccines, which creates demand for these bioprocessing technologies. Of course, most of the pipeline biological pipeline, many companies are mm, doing research, or many companies have pipeline with respect to cell and gene therapies, including CAR, autologous or allogenic therapies, and it constitutes a significant share of around 18 to 20%. In terms of the market, when we segment by end users, of course, biopharma companies still holds most of the production facilities, in-house production facilities. They produce themselves all the biologics, mAbs, and vaccines, and they constitute around 60% of the market, whereas CDMOs constitute around 30%. Major CDMOs, loans, and other CDMOs have been uh, uh, supporting biopharma companies in producing these biologicals, and they are increasing their manufacturing capacities with respect to these biologicals or biosimilars, and they constitute around 30% of the market. Academia, though, they contribute for scale production for experimental therapies or early phase trials, and others include than 5% of the market. The biopharma and CDMO constitute around 90% of the bioprocessing market. If you try to understand the demand for bioprocessing technologies across the phase of drug development, of course, commercial scale constitutes more than 70% because of because of the production in large volumes and complying to the regulatory compliant regulations, and uh, needed more equipment and consumables to produce such a uh, high scale of the drug product. Whereas clinical uh, medium scale production for supporting clinical trials and uh, complying with the GMP operations constitutes around 20%, whereas preclinical, it's very small scale operations on early stage research, proof of concept, mostly proof of concept studies, requires minimal bioprocessing resources. So in terms of the end products, as already discussed, monoclonal antibodies, they constitute majority of the biologicals, followed by vaccines, cell and gene therapies, and of course there are other recombinant proteins or other modalities which are protein based, or hormones which also create demand for these bioprocessing equipment or technologies. So here, this slide, of course, there are many bottlenecks with respect to even monoclonal antibody production, such as production in high volumes or with respect to vaccines. But I just put one slide with respect to bottlenecks in cell and gene therapies, as this is of the niche high demand concept in biologicals production. And what are the general bottlenecks, and how the major players within the bioprocessing workflow are developing solutions to address these bottlenecks. For example, viral vector production is always constrained by limited capacity, low yields, or scalability is very challenging with respect to viral vector production. And there is batch to batch variability. And the companies such as PackGene, or even this is an example, but there are other companies as well which are developing AAV production or viral vector production platforms to increase the yields and to have large batch production in less time. Uh, cell expansion is very challenging during CAR therapies, whether autologous, patient-derived autologous cells. So Lonza has come up with an automated CAR processing platform, reducing handling time and increased throughput. Manual open or manual workflows is will increase contamination risk, reduces reproducibility, and companies has have come with a closed automation platforms that reduces contamination and improves process consistency. So these are examples. So the point is, all the companies are uh, providers or technology providers in the bioprocessing workflow. The companies are developing various technologies to solve the current unmet needs or current challenges with respect to cell and gene therapy production, or monoclonal antibody production, or viral production. So, what are the market growth drivers in the bioprocessing market? One, definitely aging population. The population over 65 is estimated to grow from zero point 0.8 billion to 1.6 billion by 2050. So, growing population uh, indirectly or directly demands for high healthcare mm, and high demand for personalized medicines, or high demand for infectious oncology or immunological drugs. Uh, and second, biologics are gaining importance. Uh, 40% of all the drugs are biologics in 2024, and it is estimated to reach 50% by 2030. So high share of the biologic, continuously increasing share of biologics in the overall pharma landscape, which directly uh, impacts the demand for bioprocessing equipment and technologies. Second, around 30% of the current pipeline within the biologics or cell and gene therapies, which need uh, highly automated, continuous process flows and high demand for the specialized bioprocessing equipment. And growing number of biosimilars, if we see from 7 approved biosimilars to 2016 to around 46 approved biosimilars. Biosimilars are the copy versions of biologics. So as more number of biosimilars approvals and more number of biologics being uh, mm, researched or commercialized, there is a growing demand for these bioprocessing equipment, consumables, or technologies, and overall bioprocessing market per se will grow in the next in future because of these market drivers. So, of course, this is continuous, as we mentioned, rising demand for biosimilars, and other few drivers are one, adoption of single-use technologies. So as mentioned, single-use bioreactors, bags, reduce contamination risk and lower the turnaround time. And there is a growing use of single-use systems across the bioprocessing workflow, which augments the market for bioprocessing, and growing preference for continuous manufacturing instead of uh, batch manufacturing. There is a growing preference for continuous manufacturing using perfusion bioreactors, where the products are produced in a very less time instead of batch to batch or silo manufacture. So, because of all these demand and supply side factors, the bioprocessing market is estimated to grow in double digits in the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, there are few restraints along with the drivers. Restraints are mostly related to process complexity and scalability, and limited standardization. There are few major players in the bioprocessing workflow, and each player is uh, commercializing their own standard equipment or single-use systems in the bioprocessing workflow. And compatibility, the use of various branded products across the bioprocessing workflow and integrating them into the bioprocessing workflow is one of the challenge. And also analytical bottlenecks, though there are novel technologies which I'll touch upon in the later slides, such as digital twins or process analytical technologies. The use of such technologies, integrating them to the already existing bioprocessing workflow is challenging, and that is one of the bottleneck to monitor real time the operations related to bioprocessing. So, what are the key trends in bioprocessing market? One, as mentioned, adoption of single-use bioprocessing systems, the use of single-use bioreactors, mixers, filtration units, bags, tubing, and other consumables across the bioprocessing workflow because of um, advantages such as faster turnaround time, or cost efficient, complying with the regulations, more safe. So these are all the advantages that is uh, um, i- that that helps the adoption of single-use systems. Second trend is automation and digital manufacturing. The integration of artificial intelligence or digital twins, process breakthrough modeling, or process analytical technology across the workflow, from the starting first step of upstream to the final fill and finish formulation of last step of the downstream. Integrating each step of the bioprocessing workflow with digital technologies for real-time monitoring is one of the major trends across the bioprocessing workflow. And shift towards continuous or end-to-end continuous operation. Instead of batch processing, produce one batch of a biological product. So doing continuous processing using perfusion technologies or other real-time monitoring technologies, so allows faster production and with reduced carbon footprint. And the other trend is, yeah, closed systems, development of specialized bioprocessing work systems such as closed systems, automated systems, specifically for CGT manufacturing is also one of the trend with respect to bioprocessing workflow. So this completes the session one related to overall market for bioprocessing, drivers, trends, and how the market has grown.